My name is Wesley. As I said, if you hadn't had a chance to meet yet, I would love to shout you a coffee one day if you make it to Australia. I'm based here in Sydney. I am from Brazil, as you can notice in my accent. I've been here for 7 years now, and I love acai bowls. I could have acai bowls every day. That's like my my favorite food. And with me, I have a great gentleman, and his name is Dan Purdy Smith, and he is here with us. And Dan has been someone that I've got to know recently, but he's been on our church for so many years, and he will share a little bit of wisdom with us. Dan, thanks for making the time. Thanks for being with us. Why don't you say hi, share a little bit about you?
Hey, so good to see you, Wes, and hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Hey, we don't take it for granted that you guys are jumping in. And sorry, as I was joining Zoom, I was on nice and early, ready to go, and then I got the Zoom is not responding notifications. I thought I'll quickly restart my laptop, and then it starts uploading all the updates. So 7 minutes later, I was freaking out. So anyway, I made it, and it's so good to see you guys. Yeah, as Wes said, my name's Dan. Also love acai bowls, by the way, Wes. It's we get the bulk packages from Costco and blend them up. My kids love it. So some of that Brazilian superfood, it's good. But yeah, I'm the stewardship pastor at Hillsong Church. So really excited to just take the next few moments to have a bit of a session with you guys, and look forward to as well. Hopefully, we can do a bit of Q&A at the end. So please be ready to ask questions. Even throw them in the chat as we go. It'll be good.
All right. So good. Thanks so much, Dan. Look, you're already giving some wisdom because you buy the whole package, which means that you pay cheaper. I go to the cafe downstairs and I pay $20 for it. So I'm glad to hear. I already learned something from you. So stewardship pastor, tell us a little bit, what does that mean, or how did you come into this role at a church?
Yeah, look, great question. When I became a stewardship pastor, well, I should say when I got asked if I would consider to step into the role as stewardship pastor, I had never heard of a stewardship pastor. So I had no idea what they did. And I didn't know that this role existed within churches. But as a stewardship pastor in Hillsong Church, I've been in this role now for 3 years, almost actually 3 years to the week. I started in the last week of September 2018. So yeah, pretty exciting. So the main responsibility of my role is I am responsible for the financial health of people and families in our church. So helping people understand what the Bible says about money, which we're going to get into in just a moment, and helping them apply that to their lives. And that's really, in essence, what my role is about. I work in the generosity space with some of our generosity leaders here at Hillsong. People like our kingdom builders, people that maybe business or career focused. I work with them as well, build community and support and networks around a lot of that stuff. So yeah, all things finance, God, faith is sort of where I operate in. So it's it's a privilege.
That's so nice, bro. Glad that you do that. Well, so without any further ado, tell us, what does the Bible say about generosity? Take us through it.
Yeah, great. Well, look, I'll get into it. Now, I don't know, Wes, I should ask you, I had some very basic slides. I don't know if it's better for me to share slides, which are really just some headings, or if I should just talk like this. I don't know if you've got a preference, but I can do either.
Yeah, I guess you can share this slide, because then people taking notes will be a bit easier as well. I just made you the host. You should be able to share your screen now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, well, look, I'll share my screen. Just some basic slides. You guys should still be able to see my face. And I've got 2 monitors here, so I'm hoping that I can see all yours as well. So let's see here. Okay, I think we're rolling. Can you see?
Oh, yes, beautiful.
Oh, good, fantastic. Well, I'm going to be, I'm just going to get this set up so I can still see you guys. So that's important to me. As I said, as we go, please feel free to, at the end, we're going to leave sort of 10, 15 minutes. I think we'll be wrapped up by 11, but 10, 15 minutes, possibly ask questions, love questions. You can pop them in the chat, or you can unmute at the end and ask, and just be great to have a bit of a conversation with you guys. But yeah, let's jump into it. Hey, there's a lot to share. There's a lot we could a lot of ground we could cover. I'll put it this way: we run a 7-week course here at Hillsong covering this stuff, and each topic, we have 7 topics we go through. Each topic, you know, it's like an hour and a half session on each topic. So I am attempting to touch on a really big subject here. So obviously a lot of stuff with money as well. I think it's really important to build the right context to, and that's something I'm always very mindful of doing when it comes to doing things like this. But look, I just thought we'd jump into it. We'll touch a few headlines. So, you know, obviously take this with the understanding that we're not able to build the appropriate context we'd like to, but hey, it might prompt some great questions, and I might even learn something from you guys at the end as well. Well, I'm anticipating that, which would be cool. But look, I guess a bit of an overview. Let me just... So a little bit of an overview of things we'll touch on today is the Bible and money. We're going to look at defining stewardship. We're going to ask the question, why is stewardship important? We're going to talk about planning and foundations. So in regards to our financial lives, we're going to talk about investing our way to wealth. And then we're going to finish by talking about a generous life. So as you can see, we've just got a few minutes to cover some pretty massive topics there. But hey, thought we'd touch on elements of all of them and give you a little taste test, and then we can just take it from there. So look, Bible and money. Reality is the Bible says a lot about money. There's over 2,400 references to the topic of financial stewardship in the Bible, which is crazy, especially as a comparison when you compare topics like faith, prayer. Even if you were to do a word search on love, there's almost a fifth the amount of verses on those, you know, foundational core topics to our faith as there is around money and financial stewardship themes in the Bible. So this is something the Bible talks about a lot. 16 of Jesus's 38 parables involved money themes, which I find was just phenomenal. And in fact, it was the second most talked about topic by Jesus. Which is pretty crazy. The kingdom of heaven was taking the #1 spot there, of course. But you know, the Bible covers a lot of ground. Talk about things like as practical as budgeting, saving, debt. You know, talks about things that maybe require perspective shift when it comes to money. So things like provision, themes like contentment, obviously generosity, and as well, the Bible has some great challenges around topics of money, and I guess things that can come as a result of our interaction with money, things like greed, corruptness, stinginess. So Bible really does cover a stack of ground there. Look, if we were to define stewardship in a nutshell, I think first and foremost, we would understand that a steward, that word steward or stewardship, it's an old English word, and it was used to describe essentially the master of a lord's house. So in sort of middle-aged times in England, a steward would be someone who was responsible for looking after the affairs of all the master and his household. So the lord of the manor, if you think that, he would find a steward who would basically run everything for him. And stewardship today, really, it's primarily used in a Christian context, and it describes the managing of money, or the management of money. And you know, I think most of us would be pretty aware of that. But I think if we're going to understand, well, you know, stewardship from a biblical point of view, we've got to understand this principle of ownership. And look, it's really the essence of it. I've written it down here on the slide. God is the owner. We're called to manage his resource on his behalf for his intentions and purposes. And I think in understanding God's the owner, look, I'm sure this isn't groundbreaking for some of you, but sometimes hearing it in this context really helps. You know, first page of your Bible, you open your Bible, Genesis 1:1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And you know, we can see that God is the creator, but we can also see that he's retained ownership of his creation. Deuteronomy 10:14 says, indeed, heaven and the highest heavens belong to the Lord your God and all that is in it. Psalm 24:1, and this is also, in fact, this psalm is quoted in the New Testament as well in 1 Corinthians 10:26. It says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. And Psalm 50, just one more scripture for you here, just speaking to God's ownership. Psalm 50, verse 10 to 12, in the NLT version, says, "For all the animals of the forest are mine, and I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know every bird on the mountains, and all the animals of the field are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for all the world is mine and everything in it," says the Lord. So you can understand that God is the creator of everything, but he's also the owner, and he's retained this ownership. Now, God, however, did give us the call of stewardship, and we can see this again in Genesis chapter 1, speaking of Adam and Eve. God says in Genesis 1:28, it says, God blessed them of Adam and Eve, and he said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it. Reign over the fish of the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry across the ground." And then God said, "Look, I've given you every seed-bearing plant throughout the earth and all the trees for your food." I can understand that God is the creator, God is the owner, yet he is entrusted to us, mankind, this charge, this call of stewardship. We can even see this. Many of us might be familiar with the parable of the bags of gold in the New Testament, in Matthew 25. You can find it. And look, I won't read it all here, but it's really in verse 14 onwards we can find this parable. For the sake of time, I might just paraphrase it and describe it. Essentially, Jesus is talking about a master who entrusted 3 servants to different portions of his wealth. One entrusted 5 bags of gold, and another he entrusted 2 bags of gold, and to a third he entrusted 1. And you might remember from this parable is both the servant that had the 5 and the servant that had the 2, they went and they put their money at once to work, the Bible tells us, and they doubled it. They essentially came back and gave the master more. The servant that was only entrusted to 1, he went, and as we know, he just buried it. He didn't do anything with it. And, the master returned from a journey, and the 2 that had multiplied what was given to them said, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling this small amount, so I will give you many more responsibilities." Let's celebrate together. And then the guy that didn't do anything, we obviously know he got a really harsh rebuke. The master replied to him, "You wicked and lazy servant. If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it." So you can see there's this expectation here. Jesus is telling this parable to say there's an expectation that we're going to multiply that which we've been entrusted to manage, that which the master has entrusted us to manage. And I think in, understanding stewardship, the key question here isn't, are we going to be stewards? The reality is we're stewards of God's creation, whether we want to be or not. That's just one of the realities. And the question we need to be asking ourselves is, what kind of stewards will we be? Will we be the type of stewards that we hear the master's voice say to us, "Well done, good and faithful servant"? Or are we going to be the stewards that unfortunately have to hear the master's rebuke because we didn't do anything with what he entrusted to us? So look, I love this verse in 1 Corinthians 4, verse 2. It says, "Moreover, it is required of stewards that they be found faithful." And I pray for all of us that we would cultivate and we would grow a passion for stewardship, that we'd be faithful stewards. And when it comes to asking that question, what kind of stewards will we be? We'd be stewards that are faithful, that can hear the words and the compliments of our master. To steward well, the reality is we need to know the owner. We need to know his intentions. That's the only way we're going to be able to steward well. While there's a lot of wisdom, we're going to talk through just some practical ways we can steward well in the next few moments. Really, there's no clear blueprint for how you're to steward, for how I'm to steward. We've each been given individual gifts, talents, responsibilities according to our ability. That parable, even there in Matthew 25, told us each was given according to his ability, according to his means. And what Wesley's called to steward, what I'm called to steward, what some of you guys are called to steward, it's all going to be different. And that's what's the important thing about stewardship, and the crux of stewardship is, if we're going to do it well, we need to know the owner. And we'll only steward as well as we know him. And I guess in many ways, when we're saying, what is stewardship? Stewardship simply facilitates intimacy with Jesus. And I don't think the two can be separated. And possibly that's why in the Bible, twice in the Gospels, it says where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You see this money thing, and the reason why Jesus, I think, possibly talks about money so frequently is it's so connected to our heart. And ultimately, it's connected to our relationship with Jesus. So why is stewardship important? I guess in some ways, we've covered that. Parable of the sower, just to share one more parable with you guys, can be found in Mark chapter 4. And well, I'm sure we know this, Jesus tells this parable. He goes on from Mark 4:13, starts explaining this to his disciples. Jesus says, if you don't understand this parable, how will you then understand any parable? Talks about a farmer who sows the word and talks about the first seed, right? He said some people like the seed that goes along the path where it's sown, the enemy comes and snatches it away. And sorry, I'm half reading, half paraphrasing here. Others, like seed sown in rocky places, they hear the word at once, they receive it with joy. I mean, it's a good word, right? It's good news. And you hear it. I mean, if someone actually explains the gospel to you, I mean, you receive that with joy. It is genuinely good news. But when trouble or persecution comes because of the word, people quickly fall away. So that's the second seed. I'm sure we know people like that. They've accepted Jesus. They've said yes to the promise of God in their life, but then they don't stick it out. Unfortunately, it's got a shallow root. And then the third seed Jesus speaks about here, he says, when still others, like seeds sown among the thorns, they hear the word, but the worries of this life, the deceitfulness of wealth, and the desires for other things come in and choke the word, making it unfruitful. And so that's the third seed. Goes on to, Jesus finally describes the fourth seed, says, others like seed sown on good soil, hear the word, accept it, and produce a crop, some 30, some 60, some 100 times what was sown. And I don't know about you, but when it comes to producing a crop, when it comes to fulfilling God's purpose in my life, in regards to the impact I can have here on earth, the people whose lives I can see impacted by the grace of God. Like, I want to believe for that crop, that 30, that 60, 100 times. I think that's what as believers we're all called to do. But notice, what's the difference between the third seed and the fourth seed? It says this, and this is the seed that it's choked out, its fruitfulness is choked out by the thorns. It says three things. It's the worries of this world, it's the deceitfulness of wealth, and it's the desire for other things. These are stewardship related issues. Do you know the number one reason for stress? And in fact, the number one reason for marital breakdown here in Australia, I can speak for this, and I think most developing countries these days, the stats would be quite similar, is the number one reason, it's stress around money. It's worries around money. So it says worries of this world, the deceitfulness of wealth. So in other words, wrong thinking, unhealthy thinking about wealth, and the desire for other things, desiring things. So if we can get these stewardship related thinking and understanding right in our lives, we can transition from being the type of people where God's fruitfulness is choked out in our lives, and we can start to live lives that truly do produce a crop, 30, 60, some 100 times what was sown. And so this is why one of many reasons why I believe stewardship is important. And we see this, by the way, teaching financial literacy courses here at church. Like, we'll do things as simple as teaching people how to manage a budget, or how to just do some of the really basic things. And we see the impact spread across the whole spectrum of their lives. We see their marriages improve. We see sometimes we see their health and fitness improve. Sometimes we see opportunities at work start to open up for them. Their relationship with their children improve. We genuinely see God's blessing permeate the whole spectrum of people's lives when they get this money stuff right. And it can be sometimes as basic as that. I say to a lot of people taking our courses, I say, do you know that creating a budget might be the most impacting thing you do this year? And for many of them, that proves true. So anyway, let's talk about planning and foundations. Look, the Bible talks a fair bit about planning. The Bible tells us about planning. It says that planning requires a goal. Habakkuk 2:2 says, write the vision, make it plain on tablets that he or she may run who reads it. So planning requires a goal. Planning requires strategy. Jesus talked about this in Luke 14:28. He says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Why don't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? There's a strategy involved there. We've got to see if this can make sense, if we actually have the resource to complete it. Planning requires diligence. Proverbs 21:5 says, the plans of the diligent lead to profit as surely as haste leads to poverty. And Planning requires wisdom and skills. Proverbs 28 verse 26 says, whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool, but he who walks in wisdom will be delivered. So sometimes this planning, it requires us to develop the wisdom and also the skills to be able to outwork those plans well. And ultimately our plan, especially when it comes to money, finance and resource, our plan ultimately finds its place in God's plan. Proverbs 16:9 says, in their hearts human plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps. So the biggest mistake I would see that people make when it comes to financial stewardship is failing to have a plan. And research here in Australia suggests that 85% of Australians, I mean, that's almost 9 in 10 of Australians have no idea how much money they're spending month to month. And I think that's a staggering amount. And they have absolutely no plan for their money. You know, and the classic quote rings true, I think. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail every time. And, you know, it's so easy for money just to come in and go back out of our bank accounts with us being none the wiser as to where it went or what it was spent on. And, you know, this is really where a budget comes into play. Now, I know I just said the B word, and for a lot of people, that word is like, hear the word budget, you can kind of cringe, you can kind of think, but really you've got to understand that a budget, it's simply a plan for our money. And I've written here, it's an incredibly underrated mechanism to help us stay in charge of the resource which the Lord has entrusted us to steward. And the reality is that a budget, it's really a plan designed to empower us to move towards our goals. Now, why do we need a budget? Look, a few key points. And again, we usually spend an hour talking about this, so I'm really skimming over it. But a few key points is essentially a budget. It's going to help us overspending. It's going to help us assign value to each and every dollar that comes through our hands. Despite what it may seem, a budget is not designed to control us. Rather, it puts us back in the driver's seat when it comes to money. While learning to budget, yes, it's going to require some self-control. Its intention is not to limit us. Rather, it's a powerful supplement in seeing our dreams and goals become a reality. A budget allows us to prioritize. So we say no to certain things now so that we can say yes to better things in the future. And in fact, a handy mantra to remember is every no gives way to a better yes. And that's so important. You know, Proverbs 27 verse 23, it encourages us, be sure to know the condition of your flocks and give careful attention to your herds. So there's a biblical expectation that we'll have a clear picture of where we stand financially in regards, you know, and I think one of the most practical ways we can do this is by careful planning and budgeting. So look, when it comes to building financial foundations, is that scripture I shared before? I would just say the first step, and one of the key steps in budgeting, is to identify clear goals. Remember, the budget isn't the goal, it's just the means. You've got to establish clear goals. It's getting money right. It's about steering our behaviors in the right direction. It's about behavioral finance. And a budget, really, we've got to craft some clear goals. Maybe for some of us, that's something we need to do when it comes to money, is just put down some really clear, specific goals. And a budget is the plan that helps us move towards that. Okay, financial foundations. Now, often, look, I think most credible financial voices out there would agree that these foundations in this particular order are crucial to building a sound and healthy financial life. One proverb just to throw in the mix again, I just love how much the Bible talks about money, and I just can't help but share these verses. Proverbs 24 verse 27, it says, put your outdoor work in order and get your fields ready. After that, build your house. Sometimes there are orders to things, and sometimes, I mean, you guys would know this, the deeper the foundations, the taller the building can be. And it's so important when it comes to getting money right that we build our foundations. Look, I'm going to skim over this really quickly, but just to give you an outline, anyone that's looking to move forward and put together a bit of a plan for their money, once they set some goals and put a budget in place, the next thing we ask them to do is get these foundations in. And it's important that this is something you do in order of how they're listed. So the first is to save an emergency kitty. Here in Australia, the recommended amount for that emergency kitty is $2,000. I think in America, I know Dave Ramsey and guys like that will say it's $1,000. It's all got to be a bit relative to where you live, your cost of living and your particular currency. But here, about 2,000 Australian dollars. The idea of this emergency kitty is we're going to break the cycle for some people of living paycheck to paycheck. Research here in Australia shows that 50%, 1 in 2 people live paycheck to paycheck. That's crazy. So saving is $2,000, keeping that in a bank account to the side. It's creating a little bit of financial breathing room for us. The next thing we're going to do is once we have that emergency kitty, once we have that foundational goal set or done, tick that off. The next thing we're going to destroy debt. And we're talking particularly bad debt, consumer debt, things like credit cards, things like maybe car loans, stuff like that. So we're talking about, we're going to destroy our debt. We're going to put a plan in place to do that. And the third thing we're going to do is we're going to, after we've destroyed our debt, so we've ticked off those first 2 foundational goals, the third thing we're going to do is we're going to save an emergency fund. And we take that initial $2,000 out of our emergency kitty and we build it up to be about 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. So how do we know that? We look at our budget, we look at what expenses we have in our budget, and we're saving up 3 to 6 months. And really this is here to not for if emergencies happen, it's for when emergencies happen. It's going to stop us going into debt. It's we're here again in Australia, the survey found that a quarter of Australians didn't have enough money, didn't have enough savings to cover a $500 emergency. And, the reality is life's going to throw curveballs at us, but we need to make sure that, there might be a shock, they might be unexpected, but we're not going to be underprepared for them. And that's going to be crucial to putting that into place. Look, once we've got these financial foundations into place, as that scripture I shared before, we're going to talk, that's when we can start to build wealth. That's when some of the fun stuff happens, and talk about investing our way to wealth. The reality is when it comes to saving money, we're going to get really good at saving money. Our budget's going to help us do that. And we're going to be saving for our emergency fund as well. But the reality is when it comes to building wealth, we can save to spend. We don't want to spend money we don't have. It's important to save to spend. I'm definitely not a fan of the buy now, pay later type arrangements that are very popular these days. Some of them, might be interest free for a certain amount of time. No, we're going to save to spend. We're going to spend the money that we have. We can save to be prepared, so we're going to be prepared in our emergency fund. But the reality is, for most of us, we can't save our way to wealth. We invest our way to wealth. The Bible talks about investing. I love this. Ecclesiastes 11, verse 1 to 2. It says, invest your money in foreign trade, and one of these days you'll make a profit. Put your investments in several places, many places, in fact, because you never know what kind of bad luck you're going to have in this world. So it talks about investing there in Ecclesiastes 11, also talks about diversification, one of the great principles in investing. Look, investing in a nutshell is really putting our money to work for us. I'm sure many of us are familiar with working for money. That is, we're trading our time and our talent for a wage. Investing is putting our money to work for us. What I love about investing is you and I, we only have so many hours in a day that we can work for money. But when we put our money to work for us, our money doesn't need to sleep. Our money doesn't need to eat. Our money can be working for us 24/7 around the clock. And that's the exciting thing about investing. And look, that could be a whole topic in and of itself, but I just sort of wanted to highlight it there for you guys. And finally, once, and by the way, a great key, if you're looking to start investing, you've got all your financial foundations in place. A great starting point is to, obviously, there's a lot of, you've got to be wise in how you invest, but invest 15% of your gross pay. If you've got your foundations in place, good principle is take 15% of your gross household income and invest it. Get it working for you to build wealth for the long term. All right. And look, finally, a generous life. Look, we're talking about living a generous life. Generosity really is the goal of stewardship. Acts 20, verse 35, and this was quoted words from Jesus. Even though it's in Acts, it was quoting Jesus. I believe it was the Apostle Paul who said this. Said it's more more blessed to give than receive. Most of us, when we talk about blessings, we talk about stuff that's coming into our lives. Reality is it's more blessed to give than receive. 1 Timothy 6, verse 18 to 19, it says, remind the wealthy to be rich in remarkable works of extravagant generosity, willing to share with others. These spiritual investments will provide a beautiful foundation for their lives and secure for them a great future as they lay their hands upon the true meaning of life. Look, we're called to be generous with our lives. That's our labor, that's our influence, that's our finances, and that's our expertise. And I believe when we do that, that's the goal of all this. That's the goal of stewardship. So look, that's a few things I sort of touched on. I might stop the screen share. And yeah, just open up if there's any questions or anything you guys would like to discuss, or anything that you'd like me to maybe talk a little bit more on. I'm more than happy to do that.
Wow, that was very, very helpful, Dan. Thank you so much. And as you're talking about making a budget for a goal, I was thinking that we have many people here that, well, might be joining us because obviously they want to learn more about finances, but for many of them as well, they are looking at saving up money to actually do Hillsong College as well. So there's like that tuition as a goal, or traveling all the way to Australia as a goal as well. So I guess you touched already when you said the goal and the budget as the medium, but would you have any practical tips when you're like in your early stages of saving up for a big goal? How did that work out for you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, look, it's especially in the early stages, it can seem hard. And by the way, I just saw Calvin asked if, yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy to, you know what, before this is over, I might, do you do a follow-up email, Wes?
Yes, we were going to put the recording session on YouTube.
Oh, cool. Okay, awesome. Well, I'll make sure we get a copy of the slides. But yeah, Matt, look, I mean, when it comes to budgeting and saving, yeah, it definitely can be hard early days because you think, oh, I've got this big goal and it's so massive. I think it is important to understand that a little bit does go a long way. And I guess the same principle of, you know, big ships can be sunk by small holes. The same is opposite when it comes to just little things done in reoccurring patterns can really add up. And I'm sometimes amazed, like one of the little tools I use for money that I'm saving, I use roundup. So when I'm every dollar I spend, you know, my banking app, basically, if I spend $7.20 on something, it rounds up to the nearest dollar. So 80 cents gets then pulled into a savings account. And it's just, I never really feel the pinch of that practically, but I'll look in a couple of months and I'm like, oh, there's $60 there, which doesn't sound like much, but you know, $60 I wouldn't have otherwise had. And I think sometimes, like at first it can seem hard, especially when it comes to saving or investing for that matter. But over time, you'll be surprised how quickly it adds up. And I think you've got to keep your eye on the goals. You know, I think you really do. You need to, and by the way, goals are always going to change and adjust. And, you know, there's been times in my life where something happens and I've got a goal to do something within 3 months, but life happens and I just have to adjust it. And now it's 5 months till I do that. And that's just a reality. But key thing is we want to be moving to where we're going to move with the right behavior. We want to be doing it in a way that's not getting us into debt, that we're still able to keep really healthy and solid foundations. And you'll also be surprised by how much God actually blesses the process. Even if it's a process, sometimes paying down our debt. And God's not going to do the work for us, but when we work and we invite him into the process, you'll be surprised to see there's just little miracles that are going to happen along 100%. The way that sometimes you won't recognize until you look back in hindsight. But yeah, I'd encourage you, if you're saving and your goal seems, maybe insurmountable or seems overwhelming, it just seems like you're at such beginning phases, just give it time. Don't worry, little by little wealth is built. And there's no such thing as get rich quick schemes. There's no such, can't fast track your way to wealth. Reality is it's going to be little by little, and we're just going to put that consistency into play and allow God to breathe on it and bless it.
On that note, on the little by little, I do want to encourage a few of my brothers and sisters here, because I saw that so many come from South America, Latin America, and Africa as well. And coming from Brazil, I can relate this struggle that it can be sometimes to put yourself this goal of going study overseas. You know, I remember when I was when God first dropped in my heart this desire to travel around the world to study, for me, it just felt like it was impossible. I knew my family background. My mom lived in the favelas in Rio, in the slums. So my parents couldn't afford it. I didn't come from a wealthy family. So I had this big dream and big goal that I wanted to achieve, and I had no idea how. So I guess if I can encourage you guys with one little thing as we wrap it up, our senior pastor, Brian, he always says something that I guess stuck with me, which was use what is in your hands to fulfill what is in your heart. When I had this desire to go live overseas, what I had in my hands was my bachelor's degree. I was a graphic designer, fresh out of university. I was poor as you can possibly be, wasn't getting paid really well. And what I had in my hands to start off with was the design skills, but also I always enjoyed venturing, cooking. So what I knew to do was this little dessert of passion fruit. It was a passion fruit mousse that every friend's gathering, they would ask me to do. Wesley, could you please do the passion fruit mousse? Could you please? Okay, dessert is with Wes. So everywhere I go, people ask me to do this passion fruit mousse. So what I did was I started selling them. I actually made about 40, and I went to the youth service and I sold them. After the service, my pastor was really nice to let me do it, and I sold this passion fruit mousses after the service for 2 months. And then after 2 months, all I had combined together, saved together, was $250. And then with $250, then I jumped on into my design skills. And I started designing T-shirts with Christian sayings, like Bible verses, but well designed and throughout the T-shirt. And with $250 that I had from the mousse, I went on and I did 20 T-shirts. And then with the 20 T-shirts, I had a little more margin then, and my T-shirt sold in 3 days. And then I went on and did more 50, and my friends bought it in 2 weeks. And then in 6 months, I ended up selling almost 700 T-shirts to almost every state in Brazil. And with that T-shirt money, I paid my flights, I paid my tuition, I paid my visa, I paid my whole process to come to Hillsong College, all starting from passion fruit mousse. So I want to inspire you, and I wanted to give you some hope that fulfilling what God put in your heart, it's not impossible, because first He put it in your heart. And I used to say, if it's God's will, it's God's will, it's God's bill. He will pay it, but you will work for it. He will give you creativity. He'll drop things in your heart. And now that I've come to Australia, I put all my designs and my story in a blog post. And now 7 years in Australia, I still receive messages from people saying, hey, I'm using your designs to sell T-shirts, to pay for my wedding, to pay for my mission trip to India, to go on my dream destination, So don't underestimate the skills you have, the things you can do, and the little things you can do, as Dan was saying, to save up little by little. God's going to use that and He will multiply, because I didn't go after 700 people. He brought them, and I was doing all I could with what He had in my hands. So yeah, just wanted to share this little story with you. Dan, thank you so much for dropping the gold and wisdom. And I'm dropping now in the chat. If you want to book a call with us, we would love to chat one-on-one with you, or you can also email us at future.students@hillsong.com. Thank you so much, Sasha JN. Don't go. I need to give one T-shirt to one of you. So it's a Hillsong College merch. We're going to email it to you. I'm going to close my eyes, and where my finger stops, I will give it to Dwayne Han. Dwayne Han, we will send it to you. Hillsong College T-shirts t-shirt. I just hope we get your email right. And thank you so much. Join us at Chapel right now, starting off in a few seconds. Thank you so much for being with us, and have a great time at Chapel. Thanks, Dan.
Bless you guys. Take care.